sessions that the English department is basically putting on. Slightly alternative views on what happens in English or English in Hong Kong. I'm going to have a look at exams, and they're meant to be, I'm not sure if lighthearted is the word for a Saturday morning, but they're, let's see what we can do here. You have a handout that I'll try and make reference to at times, although I tend to forget where I am sometimes, so let me try and work it out. Okay, briefly a bit about me. I'm David CONIAM. I know a few old friends and victims here in the audience, I can see, so some of you know me reasonably well. I've been involved in English language teaching for 40 odd years, and 35 of those, in fact, have been in Hong Kong. I've been here at the Institute, or at the university, as will soon be, for 3 years, where I'm head of department of curriculum and instruction. I also have a foot in the English department, as it were, so hence that's the connection that Paul Stapleton, who's the head of English, brings me in when he needs someone to help him out. My time in Hong Kong, I spent a number of years at the British Council in the early 80s, teaching and doing teacher training. And then I moved on to sort of purgatory for sort of 4 years in the late 80s with the exam authority, or the exam and assessment authority. I still struggle to stick the extra A on the end, but never mind. I then spent 20 years at Chinese U, and as I said, I've been here for about 3. My teaching and my research kind of revolves around English language education, curriculum, and assessment. I've been involved in assessment for a long time, partly from my connections with the EAA and thereafter. And so, what I'm going to look at today, I've been thinking over the last few years about English language exams in Hong Kong, and how they look and what they do, and how they fit with what happens in Hong Kong, and how we fare in terms of our international profile, if you like, and how things have changed over the decades. And so as we work through, I'll see how you feel about how the exams fit this, what I'm calling real English, whatever that is, because it's hard to put a finger on, especially when you're trying to teach English in the classroom for kids to pass the DSE. Okay. And so whether and how Hong Kong exams have become more kind of relevant, if that's the word, to real life over the years. I'm going to anchor it, you need a bit of jargon, so I'm going to anchor it to my key concepts being validity and reliability as I wander through. I do make a lot of reference to the EAA, and because despite what we think in terms of how their exams are pitched and are focused, they're actually quite well thought out and put together. But you can argue that against me later. Okay. The purpose of an exam, let me broadly frame it first, because I am talking about exams, so we need to think what these things do. And they do different things in different contexts. Some exams you need to rank order students from the most to the least able. You need to select. If you've only got 18% going to university, you need to have certain selection mechanisms. You want to provide standards, which has only been a fairly recent development since 2007 with the school cert, trying to define what standards are, as opposed to, yeah, I think an E at school cert means this, To show what's been learned, which is a positive spin on things, to encourage learning and good teaching, as opposed to just cramming for an exam. And of course, currently to, if as far as is possible, which is difficult in the context of a public exam sometimes, to link what's being tested with the bigger picture, with what actually happens with the real world. And it's the kind of, the last bit that I'm pretending is my major focus, but of course, all of them, to an extent, will be reflected in the different things that you see as I move historically through a few decades. Okay, let me just get you thinking first about what the purpose of an English language curriculum is, reflecting it with my own history back 40, or maybe I should even say 50, I have to say, years ago. When I was learning French or German, it was the same probably for your parents or grandparents, I don't know. It was all about mastering every grammatical structure, you know. I wasn't allowed on the street until I knew all my French tenses and verbs backwards. So you tested what students knew about English, which is basically English grammar. We've become a bit more enlightened over the last couple of decades, and you might say that our purpose, our sort of overarching purpose these days is to what? What do you think our overarching purpose is for what we want our students to do with their English? Apart from past exams, think about the broader picture of a curriculum. What do you think our bigger aim is? Okay, something with communication, right? That's the key word. However you view communicating, and it doesn't only mean speaking, it's the kind of texts that you read and interact with. Okay, so it's something to do with communicating. So we'll need to test then what students can do in English. Probably there's a bit of knowledge testing still in the background, but we're focusing on much more what students can do. Okay, let me just briefly frame it with my two major concepts. Validity is basically what you're testing in terms of your skills, your listening, speaking, reading, writing, your bits of grammar, whatever you're testing. That's the validity issue, which ties down to how much can a score that you get from a student, whether it's on a speaking test or a grammar test, how far can you see that as an indicator of the abilities that you want to measure? The overarching ability, of course, being something to do with communicating. As I said, so that's our key, ability. Reliability means more how it looks, you know, and it's about stability of results, the reliability of results across periods of time between similar or, you know, this year's Form 1 students and last year's Form 1 students, between sets of candidates, markers, whatever. Okay. All right, let me get going. And I've been framing this because it's quite interesting and fun to have a look. I'm not sure if fun is the right word, but I'll let you decide. A decade at a time. So I'm going to kick off back in the dark days of the 60s and the 70s. Initially I'll have to cheat because I wasn't here then, but I kind of have a couple of key informants and things I've got from the exam authority that kind of put it into perspective a bit. Okay. The 60s and the 70s were behaviorist times. Behaviorist in the sense of Skinner's pigeons or rats or whatever they were, you know. There was a strong focus on reliability and accuracy, and some of the test types involve things like translation, a lot of grammar, and a lot of multiple choice. They kind of overlap even though they're slightly different in their sort of tenor. Okay, so let's have a look at a quick example. And this is, I think, on page 1 of your sheet. Okay, here's a text and some questions for you as you read the text. Who do you think the writer is? How old is he? What's his nationality? Where are the places mentioned? Well, one's pretty obvious, London, which is what native land. And what do you think the source of this? Do you think this came from? Can you just give it a quick cursory read through? The heading gives a kind of key to what the source is. Okay, as a text, who do you think has written it? How old do you think the person is? Does it sound like a young person's text? Yeah? Would you say that? Would your 15 or 16-year-old say, "What an uproar! I must confess my first impressions were not very favorable"? Does it sound like it's written by a 16-year-old? No, it isn't, is it? It's written by a middle-aged person. I'd like to pretend I was middle-aged, but I'm not quite. But how old is the supposed writer? Would you guess? 15 or 16, something like that. What's the source? The top kind of tells you. It's an exam, okay? This was from that famous year. This was the school cert in '67, all right? So it's a test for, I don't know, 15, no, probably 16 or 17-year-old. But it's not a young person's text, is it? If you actually have a look, some of the wording in it. Can you see it? Can you see the orange? I can't see it. So, what an uproar! I must confess, my first impressions were not very favourable. I felt in need of rest in mind and body. I don't think a 16-year-old would have said that even in 1967, you know. And so, as it happened, when I was first playing around with this text, my oldest, who was 16, I said, "Hey, Kevin, can you redo this text for me?" Okay, and this is what he did. So it was, sorry, the places, I meant to say. London, you know. What's my native land? A village where? Yeah, okay, no, of course, it's Hong Kong, because it was the Hong Kong school cert exam, all right? I left my native land. It's a bit colonial these days. It's a bit smelly, but anyway, never mind. So, Kevin gave me this. It was September when I left Hong Kong. The journey to London took forever. When I got there, I was amazed at the difference between London and my hometown. There was loads of traffic everywhere, and it was so damn noisy all the time, but once I got used to it, it was okay. Everything looked different and weird to me, and at first, I've got to say, it didn't really grab me. A friend had told me about an okay hotel, but when I got there, I was wrecked. I'd been really busy the whole day, and I needed a bit of time to relax and chill out in the evening, okay? That's more kind of kid speak, okay? But of course, it's in this format for the exam because there are certain testing points. There are passives, there are all sorts of things that want to be tested in the context of translation. But so, what's my point? Translation is actually, in that format, is not a very communicative task. We don't do it unless you're a translator or special occasions where there are 3 people and 2 of them don't speak the other language and you're the kind of middle person. You know? We just don't do it. Still happens in China exams, in the CET, and I said, "Why do you keep doing this?" "Oh, they like to stretch the more able students." Never mind. Okay. It's local in the thing. We don't do it in real life. So it's faded from the exam for a good reason, really. I did well at it in school because I was smart in languages, but it's not a very communicative test for the majority. of students. Okay, let's stay with our old era. Sorry, also the text doesn't fit the target audience. If you have a look at how our textbooks, even our exams, broadly speaking, they fit, or they used to fit sort of school cert and use of English a lot better than these sort of texts, than that sort of, you know, old man text for a 16-year-old. Okay, have a look at this one, which is on page 1. Have a go at doing this. We won't do them all. It's a reported speech exercise, right? So in the spaces, you've got to write the words that were spoken. So what would you put in the first one? Okay. I've seen the doctor. What about C? Okay, you're a big minority. Okay, well, C? What about C? When will he arrive? Okay. D? Open the door. Okay. What do you think the source of this text was? From when? Well, I told you roughly. It's sometime in the 60s. What test was it? What level? Okay, right. Spot on. This was the primary 6 exit test. You think how many of your Form 5 kids could do it, you know? So maybe some of your grandparents stuck it in those dark days where to get from primary to secondary was a real hurdle. I mean, this is a pretty demanding task in its own way. What do you have to do in this task? What do you have to do? It's reported speech, but doing what? What do you change? Okay, you changed, but what do you change to what? Pronouns and stuff is the kind of exemplification, but what do you change? Yeah, okay. You change indirect speech to direct speech. Okay, and reported speech in school, you usually teach direct speech into indirect speech, which happens if you're a reporter, you interview someone, and and the next day you actually turn it into direct speech. When do you turn indirect speech into direct speech? Can you think of a situation? I don't know. Maybe if you're an actor or something. I mean, it's a highly artificial task. Okay. It's a very uncommunicative task to actually put it into a context. But it probably discriminated amazingly, you know? That's why some of your grandparents probably got into DBS and DGS, you know? We don't do it. Okay. Multiple choice, and this was actually quite fun. There was a strong focus on grammar and accuracy, as I said, but there was a lot of multiple choice. And this must have driven them crazy. Here's a sample item, okay? It's a very poor item, but never mind about that. And what happened with the exam authority, I think before they were the exam authority, when they were part of the EMB or whatever, they had multiple forms of the same test, okay? So here's number 1, A, B, C, D. The answer is A. Here, it was 4. I mean, I've made this up just to give you an idea. All the questions were numbered Q, R, S, T, and then there was number 9, and they were W, X, Y, Z. So there were multiple forms of the same test to so that students, couldn't cheat or to forestall any advantage. I mean, trying to prepare multiple choice sets of these must have driven them crazy because, of course, they also didn't have computer sheets to mark them on. This was something recently from Thailand to forestall cheating prevention. And an even better one, sorry, another cheap shot. This was last week, I'm not sure if you saw it, is on the BBC in India, who are extremely good at also Also cheating. Sorry, okay. Okay. Let me float the concept of a direct test. And a direct test is basically when you test the skill that you want to test through that skill. So if you want to test listening, you give them something to listen to and then answer. Okay? If you want a reading test, you ask them to read or write, you ask them to write a piece. Okay? So this, for example, is an indirect test of speaking. What you want them to do is to write in the dialogue what the person would have said. Okay. Here's another test from, I'll tell you, this is also from the secondary school placement test, 1966. So what you have to do here, and it's a kind of indirect test of pronunciation. As it says, if there's one word which doesn't rhyme, write it in the space. If they all rhyme, then you write X. Okay? So, would you like to do a couple? In the first one, week, what do you use here? Week, cake, ache, rake. The second one, height, sight, weight, bite. I can't do the third one because I'm an R person, so I say harm, warm, calm, farm. But which one should it be? Okay, right. So you get it. Can you find any that are X's? D? I say pour, door, rower, and sword. So maybe. Please, 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 geese? No, I don't know. Okay. It's a very clever test, but I don't think we do this kind of thing in real life. Probably discriminated again extremely well. Your grandparents probably aced it. But it's not a very good test. Okay, here's one when I was working north of the border for a while. And it's a similar kind of thing. This is quite fun. Have a look at just item 38, right? And, I think China used to have something like 25 or 30%, I think, of part of their, I'm not sure which curriculum was on phonetics. I'm always hopeless on phonetics. But anyway, here you have to see which one is the key. Okay, so we've got knocked, joined, minded, and painted. Okay, so A is the key. Why? You English teachers. Why is A the key? Well, because this thing is, what is it? Voiceless. So we need it. Okay, right. So that's a standalone words. Can you say these to yourself quickly as sentences? Quickly. And you should have something like this. A.
I knocked it down.
B.
I joined it up.
C.
I minded it carefully.
D.
I hated it totally.
So, in the context of a complete utterance, which is the key? A.
I knocked it down.
B.
I joined it up.
Okay. Is A the key? No, because what do you say? I knocked it down? Or do you say I knocked it down? If you're a good speaker of English, you'll assimilate, well, basically, it starts with a vowel, so it becomes knocked. I knocked it down. So, in the context of a communicative utterance, if you're a good, lazy speaker of English, lazy being positive attribute, there is no key, of course. You know? It doesn't work. Anyway, I'm kind of playing a bit. Okay, let's move on to the 70s and see if we can get a bit closer to reality. And this gets fun. Okay, so there was a continued focus on reliability in the 70s, but meaning, relevance, began to surface a bit more. The use of English exam, the old one, which I'll talk about, which was Hong Kong U's entrance exam, was very reliability focused, but it was kind of relevant to tertiary level studies. The school cert English test had no listening test at that point, did have an oral, which we'll have a look at, because that is quite interesting. Okay, this was what the oral looked like up to 95. Any of you taking to that here? Anyway, there was reading aloud a dialogue between the examiner and a candidate. There was 2 examiners and a candidate. And then there were some supposed questions on a picture. There's a tourist with a map and he's lost. And then it kind of moved on to a conversation with the examiner. They were vaguely talking about going abroad. Okay, let's have a look at these things and see how they work in terms of real life things. Also, in those dark days, you had to put all your 35 or 30 students who turned up into this very nasty 7-point marking scheme, comparing students very heavily against each other. Okay, here's the reading aloud passage that you've got on page 2. See if you can give this candidate a score. Do you think she's a fail, a pass, or a credit? I mean, the exam authority would kill me because I'm not standardizing you, but just in terms of your gut feel, do you think she's a fail, a pass, or a credit? And of course, my larger question is, what's the, reading aloud? How real an activity is this? Okay, let's give this a go.
Let's go, we're going to be late.
Sorry, I can't find my keys. I thought I put them in my pocket, but they are not there anymore.
Did you look in your bag?
Yes, I did, and they are not there either. I wonder if they fell out of my pocket on the bus. That's happened to me once before, and I never got them back.
Well, don't worry about it. I've got my keys.
Yes, but what if I want to leave the party before you do? I won't be able to get back in. If you can just wait a minute longer, I'm sure I will find them. Now I might have put them on the dressers next to the wardrobe.
Excuse me, but what's that in the door?
In the door? Oh my goodness, it's my key. I must have left them in the lock. Well, come on, let go. I don't want to be late.
Okay. Is she going to fail? No. Is she a credit? No, okay. She's a pass. She's a good pass, isn't she? Okay, right. So, but reading aloud, do you read aloud like that? No, you do read aloud at times. I mean, I thought, where do I read aloud? And often I read aloud at breakfast. I get the paper and occasionally interact with my family while I'm eating. And, but you do it in the context of, hey, listen to this. And you're kind of highly selective in what you read. And I remember this was a terrible piece from 4 years ago, where there was 60-odd kids crammed onto a bus. And I said, and I can remember what I read. And I read this paragraph, where was it? There was one paragraph here. Okay, I said, hey, listen to this. And I said, at least 18 children were killed yesterday when a 9-seater school minibus crammed with 62 kindergarten pupils. A teacher and a driver crashed head-on into a coal truck in Jiangning County. God. You actually do read aloud, but you read selected pieces for an effect. But you don't read whole dialogues in the context of this. It's just not a communicative piece. It gives a very clear indication, immediately, of course, of where this person stands. So if you are in a school where you've got 200 or 300 kids to do a placement test on, it does give you a very quick and dirty feel, but it's not a very communicative test. Okay, let's have a look at the second part. Briefly, they ask her about the questions, and then they supposedly move on to conversation. How does this look to you in terms of conversation? Okay. How does it compare with what happens in the real world when you're having a conversation with someone?
Now, could you look at this picture for a few seconds and then we'll talk about it.
We're having a look at something like this.
What do you think is going on? What's happening in the picture?
A foreigner who want to go to one place but he don't want how to go. So he asked the policeman and then tell him the policeman is very kind to tell him so the foreigner can know how to go.
Mm-hmm. What do you think the foreigner's doing in Hong Kong?
It's travel.
Travelling. Do you think he always lives in Hong Kong, or do you think he's a visitor?
Yes, he's the visitor.
Why do you think that?
Because his hand picked a map of Hong Kong. There's a camera, and he just, I love Hong Kong.
Have you ever been to another country?
What?
Have you ever been to another country?
We're moving into
In the
conversation.
summer holiday, I go to Canada.
Go to Canada?
Yeah.
Can you tell us something about it?
I feel the people is very kind, very friendly. Sometimes tell me something I don't know.
What about the weather and the countryside?
It's beautiful, the countryside.
Did you visit friends there, or family? Or?
I go with my mother.
What do you usually do in your holidays?
Sometimes help my auntie wash dishes, something like that.
Do you like going out, shopping, camping, swimming, or whatever?
Oh, I like. But the price of the clothes is very high. I can't afford that.
Where do you like going shopping?
In Hong Kong? Mongkok. Doesn't Mongkok.
Why Mongkok? It's very crowded, isn't it?
The thing is very cheap. I can't afford that.
Is this clothes you buy? Or what do you buy when you go shopping in Hong Kong?
Shoes and trousers and something. I just...
Okay, I guess fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. How would you rate her? Is she as good, or is she better than the previous part? The same? She's not quite as good as she. I mean, but anyway, that isn't the point. How do you see it as a conversation? Is that the kind of conversation you would have? Why not? It's very one-sided, yeah. The examiners are leading. It's much more like an inquisition. Okay? So reading aloud and coming back is not a very valid test. And the conversation, one-sided, is, I think, categorizes it very well. At the end, she almost begins to warm up, but she's just answering questions, basically. But it was a direct test with all 120,000 people who did school cert. It was a hell of an achievement. I'm not sure if any other exam bodies in the world did such a test. I don't remember doing orals like that, but I did French and German at school. So, anyway. And it did require candidates to speak a bit of English. How extended you might query, but anyway, it really conversation these days as we see it, but it was a pretty good attempt in the 60s, and no, it wasn't, 70s onwards. Okay, let me come on to the listening test. Those of you who did the use of English to get into Hong Kong U, do you remember the listening test? The one before 1989? I don't know if you can remember that far back, but this was again a very interesting. It was played twice, and there are different views on whether you play listening once or twice. You know, the current view seems to be, you know, like on the radio you hear things once, so that's it. Although, you know, there is some disagreement. But anyway, the old use of English listening test was played twice, and candidates listened blind. So the question booklet was closed. Okay? They didn't know what the questions were going to be. And if you think about what you're listening these days, you're usually listening for something, you have a purpose, you have something to fill in our information that you want to get. But anyway, that's not how it was in the 70s and the 80s. Candidates listened blind and they took notes in preparation for the questions, for the question booklet they would open, which was sealed later. Okay? So it was very good. Smart, test-wise Hong Kong teachers devised the two-pen approach. And it looked like this, okay? So you take a sheet of paper and you divide it in half, and you're going to make notes as you go through, okay? I actually set a couple of these last tests. One of them I set to do with juvenile delinquency and vandalism and things like that. They were academic lectures because it was Hong Kong News entrance test. Okay, so on the first listening, you know, make notes as fast as you can. Then the left-hand side of the paper in black. Okay, so this test is something to do with adolescents having problems, vandalism, not being happy at school. Okay? So they sort of scribble down adolescents, studies, unhappy, they got damn, but they can't get the rest. They got van, but they're not really sure what it is. Okay, so second listening comes up, and you take a red pen, and you then try and fill in as much as you can on the other side. So they've got studies in the UK, they're unhappy with parents in school, they've managed to expand damage, but they haven't quite got vandalism, okay? And then finally, they open the question booklet, and they try and patch their notes together to answer the questions. So, you know, it's kind of more like speed dictation, you know, writing as fast as you can down the two sides of the page to answer the questions, I think, you know. So test validity as listening was not particularly high, because it was more like speed dictation. But you have to give Hong Kong teachers credit for, you know, or maybe this was something they washed up from a tutorial school that I'll talk about later. But in terms of listening, it wasn't a very valid listening test, because you don't scribble and you know what you're listening for beforehand, you know. These days, use of English is a rather more enlightened thing. Okay, let me circle back slightly, which fits and which doesn't fit, to the concept of rubrics. All our tests are in English, and you expect students, candidates, to understand everything that they have to do in English in order to do the test. Okay, well, is that actually the case? If you look at this 1966 test that primary 6 kids had to do, how much do you think they understood of the rubric? You know, if there's one word which doesn't rhyme, write it in the space. If they all rhyme, of course, they've been drilled in what to do, so they don't bother with the instructions, you know. They just do the test, you know. But the instructions are kind of a big communicative mismatch with what students should do. How many students actually understood the instructions? I wonder. So, let me throw something else at you for fun, which is quite interesting, which is on page 2. Okay? This is a proofreading task. This as proofreading began to get going in the late 80s as part of different Hong Kong exams. And proofreading is actually not a bad. It's actually not a bad test. If you proofread on the test itself, it's quite a clever little authentic test. If you have to write in the margins, it's a bit unreal. But if you write on the paper itself, it's not a bad little test. Anyway, in the late 1990, was it? Late 80s and 1990, the exam authority was tasked to start up what were called basic proficiency tests. I don't know if any of you were familiar with these. And these were tests for English, Chinese, and maths, where what was the pass? What was the pass grade for school cert in those days? E, okay, right. The target candidates here were those who would get an F on school cert, okay? And it was quite a clever idea. The government wanted some form of certification for people who left school with an F in school cert, and they produced them in English, Chinese, and maths. Unfortunately, government didn't recognize them, despite their push to produce them. Business didn't recognize them, so they lasted about 3 years, and girls from Band 1 schools took them as practice tests before the exam. But anyway, if you think, the target candidates here are students who would get an F, all right? So here's the input, and then on the other side of your handout, there's the actual task, which they do against the test. And again, my question here is, look at the rubric. These are students who would get an F on school cert. Do you think they understood words like capital letter missing, which punctuation mark is wrong? You have a look down. Words like written twice by mistake. It's a nightmare. If you can understand the instructions, you're certainly not going to get an F in school cert, But anyway, this exam lasted 3 years and then disappeared. Okay, back to, as I said, with my testing of phonology, I wonder how many kids actually understood it. So let me circle back to the idea of reading this time in terms of the reading is understanding the communicative intent of a passage. Okay, that's what reading means. Now, to float to here, should the whole thing, the passage, the instructions, and the questions, all be in the target language for our own kids? English. The answer is, of course, yes, because everything in Hong Kong English language exams has always been in English. Oh, except for the basic proficiency, we actually managed to get some glosses of some words or phrases in English. It was in Chinese. It was a monumental change. Anyway, but broadly speaking, everything is in English. Okay? And if you're doing reading, sure, the reading passage has to be in English, but let me float something to you that my own kids did. And this is on page 2 on your hand. If you can read it, I'm afraid it's a bit squashed up. I can only fit so much on the page. Okay, my oldest son, who you saw, did AS level and A level Spanish. So here he was Form 6, and as part of the exam, part of the reading test, they have, I think, 4 reading passages. 1, if not 2, if you can see here. This is about opening a Ronald McDonald house in Barcelona, if you can read it. The text is in Spanish, but it says, answer the following questions in English. Okay? For whom has the new centre been built? And he writes it in English. Okay? Obviously, if you're doing reading, you want to see, can students understand the text? Not can they understand the questions necessarily. Write the answers in a complete sentence. Okay, that's our kind of mythology. So let me just, I think on some reading tasks, I think there were 4, 2 did have to be answered in Spanish, but 2, the questions were in English, and they wrote the answers. Okay, let me show you one more. And this is a reading comprehension study in Israel by Ilana Shohami, who was a very famous critical language tester. She did this in the 80s. And in this study, where Hebrew is the first language in Israel, she had the same text, and she had high, mid, low groups. And she had some do open-ended questions and multiple choice questions in English or in Hebrew. Okay? So here's some results on this one passage. And if you have a look, so there's 8 questions, and here are the scores for multiple choice Hebrew, multiple choice English, open-ended English, and open-end Hebrew, and open-ended English. Okay? So let's just compare the high group and the low group. All right? And you take the multiple choice questions, and you see how did the groups compare in terms of multiple choice English and multiple choice Hebrew, and okay, the multiple choice in the first language did probably, what was that, 20% better than the multiple choice English. The high group did better, but not much difference. That's multiple choice. Open-ended, you can see the difference is very marked. The open-ended low group in Hebrew compared to the open-ended English group did twice as good, if you can add those scores up. The high group did sort of better in their first language than in their second. Okay? So open-ended questions more difficult than multiple choice questions. Questions in the L2 more difficult than questions in L1. Less able students did better on the questions in L1. More able students really didn't matter whether it was open-ended or multiple choice. You know, the Band 1 kids, you know, did fine. But for the Band 3 kids, you know, there was a substantial difference. So it does make you think, you know, if you want someone to actually, in a Band 3 class, to actually get them the communicative intent of the text, should you be asking them questions in English? Anyway, I'll float that to you. I'm not sure you'll ever get it past the exam authority, but anyway. Okay, let me roll on. We're up to the 80s, and we have a bit more of enlightenment. We have a lot more sort of communicativeness going on. There were major revisions to the key exams, much greater focus on language use, higher validity basically in terms of how things related to what people do with language. Multiple choice and grammar was still there, but they were being de-emphasized. The listening test came in 1986, which was when I actually joined the exam authority. Can you remember your school halls had these massive induction loops? And because the exam authority reckoned that in those dark days you couldn't do things over the radio, which you could do later, but not then. So, you know, they had 30,000 of these huge great headphones, which people seem to be wearing. Again now, if you see them running on the streets, maybe the exam authority sold them off cheap. But they had, you know, like 30,000 of these things. They did 5 sessions. They kept going wrong. Oh, God. It was a nightmare. But anyway, I was in the first listening test just after I joined. There was a school hall in Lockwood. And the last phrase of the test was, now take off your headsets and place them on your desk. And 2 candidates did so. You kind of wonder how much they actually had understood the test itself. But it was very innovative. It was listening tests for all. It was a direct test of listening for 120,000 candidates with 5 sessions. You don't want to be involved. But I mean, it's, you know, it is moving things forward in a communicative way. I mean, no other exam body in the world is trying to do that. So, as much as we love to hate the EAA, they actually have tried. Okay, back to the old use of English before 1989. This was Hong Kong U's entrance test. It had a very strong academic focus. As I said, I set the last couple of lectures for the listening test. One test was cursory reading and the essay paper. And I'll just have a look at these two because it's interesting how they've changed. Okay, the cursory reading, I actually went up and found one recently, looked like this. It had a very academic reading focus because it was meant to be Hong Kong U's entrance test. So you had a 5,000 word text in 6 parts. And you had 25 multiple choice questions that you had to steam through in 30 minutes. You know, it was very cursory reading, you know, because that was, I mean, it actually wasn't a bad idea. It was quite a real, you know, test. Trying to force someone to get through a long text in 30 minutes. That was from 87. In 1989, the new use of English exam came in as it kept being called. And this was a farewell to the tight academic focus, and it was much more communicative in terms of how it was opened up. It had much better validity. The paper, which everybody hated or loved, was, you know, practical skills for work and study, where there was this you know, series of booklets or texts and tasks where you had to, you know, summarize or kind of write a memo drawing together key points. It was a much broader focus, and it targeted a much wider set of reading and writing skills. Of course, it involved a lot of rethinking on the parts of teachers in terms of what had to be done. But in essence, again, it was a very bold move by the exam authority, because it was for academic and for more general purposes. Okay. The reading, the essays, okay, and this was what they were like in the old days. Write a descriptive or imaginative essay, and you've got 3 topics: having fun, greed, my first job. You know, I mean, you've got to be good to write on things like that, you know. With the first, do I have this down? Yes, this is on page 3. Over your hand, if you can see it easier. We were moving towards the concepts of process writing, okay? And this was the first piece for 1989. This was the topic. So you want to study in Australia. You write to the Australian Trade Commission asking for details about courses, and you then write an explanatory statement. Okay. So, kind of in line with process writing principles, you know, if you compare greed with study in Australia, you know, what's the topic or the context? Well, we have much clearer defined things here. Greed, you've got to make it up. Who's the writer? Well, here you have a very clear context. I suppose the writer is you, but well, maybe not. You know, maybe it's a broad argumentative piece. Who's it for? Who's it to be read by? Okay, of course, it is to be read by the examiner, not much else, you know. Whereas here you actually do have a clear audience in mind. As with the purpose, why are you writing here? You know, you're trying to put yourself forward so you might stand a chance of getting into Australia. It's an imaginative piece. Okay, so, you know, And if you think, when you write something, whether you're writing a letter to a friend, or if you're writing, I don't know, a letter of complaint to the government, or to the post, you do know who you are, you know who you're writing to, and you know why. Some of the feedback that we got when this thing first came out, they said, oh, this is so much easier because it's telling them what to do. But when you write, you know what you want to do. So in terms of relating to the real world, this thing is pretty good. I must admit, I had things when I was in school like the air inside a ping pong ball. I mean, the kids who are very good can. The rest of them, they stand no chance. Okay. 1990s. Language use more than before, multiple choice and grammar, again, being a bit de-emphasized. Innovation, the previously schools start essentially multiple choice listening became part of an integrated listening and a bit of reading, writing paper, and there was a huge change to the group discussion, to the oral. We'll have a look at these two. Okay, this was our 2-on-1 Inquisition, oral in 95, okay? This changed from 96 onwards, when it was a group discussion. You have to excuse these face masks, so I was doing a study after SARS, and that's, anyway, there's a different tale to this. Okay, so, and there were major changes here in terms of there was much more enhanced validity, because it's a discussion. So have a look, and if you can, how would you rate these 4 girls? It's much harder because you've got 4 people to try and focus on rather than just one, but where would you place them roughly in terms of pass, fail, or credit? Their topic is food in Hong Kong, which is not bad, a previous one I've used, which is organising a swimming competition, and that's tough. There are 4 of you who don't know each other. This was the school's mock exam. So there are 4 girls from different classes. They don't know each other. Okay. How do you think this compares in terms of a piece of oral English, a discussion? How does it contrast with the Inquisition? Okay. Let's have a quick listen.
And the sushi is so fresh and it
mean they should eat more bread?
Yes.
That'll do. How does that compare with the Inquisition? It's more lively, and it's more real. It's an exam situation. They don't know each other. They have, actually food is not too bad, but they're kind of going around, one by one, which, if you don't know each other, it's not easy to do. But it's a much realer discussion. I'll try and summarize it in a minute, than the previous one. Any credits there amongst them? It's harder to work out, isn't it? Actually, these two here are actually not bad. They're probably, I would say, close. But you can see they were all pass. There are no failures there. But anyway, that isn't the point. I'm not trying to grade it. But as a piece that approaches the real world, it's not really bad at all. It's quite enlightening for the mid-90s. Okay. Let's move on a bit to listening. And I want to contrast a couple of pieces here that you've got on your handout. So let's have a look. The first one is from this is stuff from, I was working north of the border, doing stuff for the college English test, right? This is undergraduates who are not English majors. And this is stuff from the textbook, but it very closely mirrors what happens in the exam, right? So in this piece, they hear 8 short conversations, which, as you will see, I won't play them all, but I'll just play a couple. So there's a man and woman, and then I go beep, and they hear the question. They don't see the questions, and they don't hear the text. All they have are multiple choice questions like the one that I've shown you here, okay? As you see, the pieces last kind of 5 to 8 seconds, and unless I'm wrong, they hear them once or twice. So here's question 2, if I can find it. The leaky faucet is starting to get to me.
What should we do about it? What does the woman want to know?
Well, that's all they hear, okay? And they've got to process that and keep going. I haven't given you the rest of the questions, but you get the idea. Have a look. What is the thread amongst these questions? How do they link? How do they cohere? How do these two pieces sound as dialogues?
I'm calling to check on the status of my TV.
Well, the new parts have just come in, so it should be ready by Sunday.
What will the man do?
Don't forget. They don't see anything, they just hear it.
This barbecue sure beats the last one we went to, eh?
Oh, that's right. Everyone had to spend the whole time inside. The good thing is, the weather decided to cooperate this time around.
What can be inferred from this conversation?
Now, those airplanes are certainly loud.
Aren't they, though? What does the woman think of the airplanes?
Okay, I'll come back to that in a minute. But you see, there's not a lot of link between these two, between these 5. Well, there's no link. They're just 5 2-line dialogues. And even, if you think, a dialogue tends to be 3 lines, Oh, those airplanes are certainly loud, aren't they, though? Yeah, God, There's usually a 3rd line in a piece of discourse. There's a follow-up, there's a comment, there's an acknowledgement. Here, anyway, okay. Let's compare this with our own backyard. School cert. And this is on page 4. This is just a sample. Here's one about a listening test about food. Okay? And there's 4 sections. I won't take you through them all, but section 1, they have to just, there are some multiple choice questions on food. Section 2, I think in the boxes, they write details of fruit and veg against the supermarket display. Section 3, they complete a supermarket staff timetable, probably a form a 5-kid wouldn't do, but never mind. And the big thing was always the form filling, okay? There was forms, or there were interviews, or all sorts of stuff. It was hard to invent all these things, but anyway, they do change. Let me play just a bit in terms of, so this is already food and drink for a party. It's spoken a bit deliberately because they have to take notes. So I won't play it all, but you'll get the idea. We'll just play a bit.
Welcome, supermarket. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to make a party order for delivery, please.
Certainly, sir. Can you give me the delivery details first, please?
Yes. My name is Simpson. Mr. John Simpson. Spelled S-I-M-P-S-O-N.
And your address, please.
That's flat 12H, block 25,
Maybe you should be making notes.
Hengfa-Chuen.
It's flat 12H, block 25, Hengfachuen.
Yes, that's right. My phone number is 2943 2110.
2943 2110. Okay, can I have your account number, please?
Yes, it's SH702907.
SH702907. Fine. And when would you like the order delivered?
This afternoon, please. Sometime after 2 p.m.
Okay, that's May the 2nd after 2 p.m. Now, what would you like to order?
Well, drinks. Let me think. 1 crate of Coca-Cola.
Okay, 1 crate of Coke. Anything else?
What kinds of beer do you have?
Carlsberg, San Miguel, Blue Girl, and Heineken.
Right. I'll have 2 crates of Carlsberg, please. No, you'd better make that 3 crates of Carlsberg.
Right. Anything else?
Yes, I'd better have a crate of soda water.
Would you like any wine?
Yes. Can I have half a crate of white and half a crate of red, please? Sorry, half of white and 2 crates of red. My friends all like red wine.
It's going to be a wild
Certainly,
party.
sir.
Certainly for 4 and 5
Right,
kids.
now I'd better get some food too. I'll take a box.
Okay, you get the idea, all right? Okay, how does it compare? The college English test stuff, you know, it's just these two-line dialogues that are totally disconnected, you know? There's a considerable reading load of all those multiple choice questions when you've only got one, like 5 or 8 second dialogue, and it's all multiple choice. I mean, we can't be unfair. There are, you know, millions who take the CET. But the integrated CE skills paper, you know, it's their dialogues. They're thematically connected to the previous stuff. The form filling has got kind of minimal demands in terms of other skills. There is not a load of reading. It's one coherent task. It's a task students might have to do in the real world. Okay, it's spoken a bit slower, but I mean, the actors actually do quite a good job. You know, it's actually a pretty good task. Right. A bit closer to home. 2000s, and the revision of the school cert exam in 2007, I think, was probably the biggest upheaval ever for English language exams in Hong Kong. Those standards referencing, syllabus A and B were combined, all sorts of things happened. But there was school-based assessment, and I'd like to have a brief look at that, because that's quite interesting how that compares with the previous discussions that we've seen. So what happened really in 2007 was really greater validity from a number of angles in terms of the exam papers. Let me focus on SBA. Okay, ideally SBA is about students doing their best. So ideally they would do 2 or 3 versions, sample tests, and the ideal was that their teacher would choose their best performances in line with formative assessment principles. And in some schools, indeed, this did happen. You know, I mean, I was at a conference at Hong Kong U where one of my past teachers, in fact, was talking, and she said she was at a school where every cycle she did 2 groups of 4. She did 8 students. And the others say, so what happens to the other 30 students? She said, oh, TA takes them to the library and they do reading. Okay? So she had a chance to actually work with 2 groups at a time. But as you probably know, the logistics of assessing 40 students when they're, God help them, brought in on Saturday, or they line up outside the hall and do just another paper, it's sort of against the spirit of what SBA is. But in its proper sense, again, SBA was quite world-breaking in terms of what the HKA was trying to do with English. Okay, let's have a look. Here's our group discussion. Students from 4 different classes who don't know each other. They've got these odd topics that have to be invented and made differently for different groups, so they're hard work. The SBA discussion was students from the same class, so they know each other, and I have a couple of clips here that you may well have seen, but never mind, they are worthwhile seeing again. Liz Hamlyons and Chris Davison, who steered all the SBA in 2005 and 6, who did an amazing job in a year and produced some very interesting stuff. Let's have a look at this 4 here. Again, how would you rate them in terms of fail, pass, or credit? I do have a bit more information in a minute that I'll give you, but give it a go. These 4 kids have watched the movie Forrest Gump. Okay, with the SBA, right, you read a piece and you then discuss it, and you watch something and you discuss it. So they've watched this movie Forrest Gump, and they have to then choose a present for a character. They know each other, they're from the same class. How would you rate this in terms of a real piece of English in contrast with the others?
Maybe first we talk about what film we have watched. It was Forrest Gump. Yeah. So it's a biography of Forrest Gump himself. Yeah.
It's a very touching movie.
And kind of comedy. Yeah. So first, we have to decide to give a gift for a person. I think we better consider what's his background, or what impression does he give you. Like Forrest Gump, I think he's a very optimistic guy, and he never gives up.
Yeah, he do things very straightforward. What he thinks, what he'll do, straight away.
I think if he's not optimistic. If he was pessimistic, he won't have this bright future.
Yeah, and I'm especially impressed by one of his motto. He always said that life is like a box of chocolate. You will never know what you get. So I think I thought of giving him a box of chocolate as a gift, since it's so meaningful to him, and even it's like it's a symbol of his life.
Well, chocolate is sweet. I like it too.
Yeah, but sometimes you may get a bitter one,
Yeah.
and that's life.
Yeah, just like life.
He could see that in the film that Forrest Gump really likes chocolate, because once he wanted to give a box of chocolate to his girlfriend in the university under the heavy rain. He ate a few and told Jenny, I have a present to give to you, but I've ate a few candies inside, and I think chocolate is a quite good idea.
But can't you see, he always hold chocolate and when he showed up, so why don't we consider other presents to give him?
So
How about a photo album to let him take some photos and put in the photo album? Yeah.
But when he was telling the neighborhood that his life and in the bus stop, it seems that he have already got a quite
Impressive.
quite clear
picture in his mind.
and he remember very much of this.
And for me, I would like to give him sneakers because he loves sports very much, and we can see that he runs very fast, and he is fond of ping pong, table tennis.
Yep. Something add to Warren's point. I think powerful can.
Okay, I'm going to stop there. You can see it's a rather more interactive, you know. They know each other. They're not just going around the circle. Yes, I am very agree with you. What is your opinion? You know, I mean, they are interrupting. They're supporting each other. There's laughter, you know. And you can see there probably are some credits there in terms of how they perform. Of course, I have cheated because that's from a Band 1 EMI school, you know. So they are very able. But let me contrast that in a minute. But the essence, you can see, it's much more of a discussion. It's a much more real-world, you know, bit of interaction than the four girls who don't know each other. So let me summarize this. Here's 4 oral situations. 1, there's no oral, which is the case in many places in the world, you know. Secondly, there was the old before 96 school showed oral, which was rather unequal one-way interaction from the examiner to the test taker. It wasn't very communicative. It wasn't very real-worldish. But hell, it was a direct test with 120,000 people. You kind of have to commend the exam authority for that. The post-96 group discussion, and you know, people were very worried. How is that going to work? How are we going to be able to rate four candidates in a group when the examiner doesn't say anything? But it did work. It did work. But in terms of as a piece, you saw there are less pressure, well, you know, to interact with a superior. They aren't interacting with a superior, they're interacting with each other. There was some peer support. What they could say was more open in terms of, although it was constrained by the topic, they were able to actually make their own contributions much more than just responding to the questions that the 2 examiners made in the previous one. So it was more communicative, a bit awkward. It's a mock exam situation, you know, so, you know. The SBA group discussion is much more natural interaction. You know, there's turn-taking, which they decide what to do. They're looking at, they're interacting with each other, which the girls weren't doing so much in here. Freedom in what they say, you know, laughter. Get a bit of laughter, it counts for a lot. Much more communicative, like a real discussion. Okay, as I said, I cheated because this bunch were a Band 1 EMI school. Let me contrast it with a Band 3 class. And this is really interesting because most Band 3 kids in the school circle, or well, a lot of them would score a donut. Because they wouldn't go, basically, so they'd score a 0. Okay, have a look at this, and to help you out, you have the script, which is, I think, on page 3, if I can, with the videos, if they're hard to follow, sometimes. I put a script together. Yeah, okay. It's at the bottom of Band 3. So, this 4 bunch, which I call, for no reason, Stanley's group, because Stanley kind of leads, they've read a book, something like The Very Small Farm, I'm not sure, but as you see, the small animals eat the bigger ones as they go on, okay? But again, these are Band 3 kids who probably wouldn't even attend the oral. And so this guy is called back right, he's called front right, he's called front left and back left, because I don't know their names. But watch how much different people interact. It's a Band 3 class, so, you know, lower your expectations.
These books have 64 pages. The picture is very funny. And then the story is about it's very easy to read. 5 years old children can know the story. Only see the picture to know this book means. Very cheap. And this book only sell $4. Very cheap. US dollar. The story is about farmer farm herders, and then he want to give his family to eat, but they don't like to eat this, and then have a mouse and the cat eat the mouse, and then the dog eat the cat, and then the dog eaten by the goat, and then the cow eat the goat, and then the cow finally the cow eaten by the woman. Then his husband want to eat her, but he said no. The only to say no. And then the story is very crazy. And we feel the story is very crazy, but the word is very easy, and the picture is very funny.
It's a great piece, and these guys would have got a score on their SBA. All we got to hope then is the exam authority doesn't statistically moderate it back down, you know. But they would have got a score, you know, and it's okay, it's kind of a discussion there, you know. They're actually all contributing. You actually needed to watch it a couple of times to see. It's not quite as good as the Band 1 EMI, but, you know, they're having a go. You really must commend them. Okay, I'm going to start rounding off. I'm not quite there yet. Okay, so far, basically, I've been putting a pretty positive spin, as you'll understand, as we come up through the years, on the content and the makeup of Hong Kong English language exam. So let me have a final bit on what happens in the classroom. Two slightly different focuses. One, in the spirit of what is intended from the content and the makeup of the exams. And the second example, which is a bit less so, okay? I would prefer to take a more ideal vision. Okay, this is in the spirit of things, and the idea here is, you know, the nature of the test hopefully encourages positive things to happen in the classroom. Positive washback. So in the context of the exam, how can you do activities in English that show a teaching exam fit, that encourage the use of English in a kind of real-world sense if possible, that students enjoy. I'm not sure whether enjoy has to be in inverted commas or not, I don't know, but maybe not. Okay. And this is a great piece that I have shown a number of times, and it's worthwhile seeing again. This is an old teacher of mine, Mrs. Mandy, and she developed this board game that's free if anybody wants it. It's a very, very clever idea. It integrates the idea of oral presentation skills, which is one of the parts of the DSE, right? There's oral presentation skills, and there's the group discussion. So students are in groups of 5, and they have this board that looks a bit like this, where they have a counter and a dice, and they move around and they land on squares. It's the first one to get to the finish line. They draw cards, and you have to speak for a minute on whatever you draw. Okay. So one person draws a card. So one student is nominated to speak. So another student draws a card, the others act as judges, timekeepers, or whatever. So here's some, so the cards are different things: environment, jobs and careers, money, school, health and beauty. Okay. And there's also charades, which I'll have to skip. Okay, so here's a few question cards about school. Do you enjoy learning Putonghua? What punishments are used at your school? Of course, we have to have that one. Our school uniforms, a good idea. What's the best thing about it? A dress casual day. Okay. So here's one group that you're going to see, and you have the script here. I think that's on. This is page 4. Yeah. At the bottom of page 4, there's the board, and we have the script. So this is a Band 3 school somewhere in the New Territories. It's a Form 5 class, but a more able class within that Band 3 school. You've got 5 boys here. The one in white is going to do a presentation, and he has to speak for 45 minutes or a minute on the topic. Okay? Right. It's on plastic surgery. So have a look at your script.
This is your turn. Why? You are so yes. One. I'm beauty. What is my color? You are red. No, I am blue. Chelsea, blue. Ask my question. Ask me questions. Would you have? What's the name? Wait. What is this? The camera is. Yes. I don't know what it means. Yes, appearance. And so, I think some plastic surgery is not important. It is not a must.
Not necessary.
Yes, not necessary. And second, I think my appearance is good. It is good enough. So I have not less plastic surgery. Yeah. Good. No, I just want to fight media lah.
Why not?
Why not only one step? It's okay lah. Not good lah. Fine. I want to go here.
It's not bad for a bunch of band three boys. It was a very clever idea. If anybody wants the material, it's available as Mandy is quite happy to share it as a PDF with board and cards. It's a very, very clever idea. Anyway, all right. So, I mean, that's what I think a good teacher who interprets the spirit of what, can happen with a good sort of a communicative activity. Here's something that's not quite in the spirit. Okay, now I've got to say something about tutorial schools because I love them. I've done a couple of studies in terms of students who spend a year studying at tutorial schools. Do they get any better? Basically, they don't. But never mind. And so here's a short piece. Just to kind of warm you up, and then I'll show something. This was from a Power Report, 2003. About actually plummeting English standards. And here's a short clip you might recognize.
Ken and Roger have been tutors for a decade. They track the trend of school cert exam questions and teach students how to tackle them. They think recent school cert exams in the English language have been getting easier, and scoring an A is not as hard as it was in the past.
絕對係，即係以前攞個 A 梗係難過而家攞啦，因為啲卷亦都越嚟越淺咗。啲題目個趨勢都係咁，即係你只要佢嘅題目要求你做得好唔使太好嘅，唔好錯咁多演戲。
Actually, it's complete nonsense because in English, you actually, I think tutorial schools, you can only achieve at your level. You don't move from a band 1 to a band 5. But anyway. Let me say something about beating the system, which is, things not being in the spirit of what it's about. This is a wonderful piece. Chris Lau, as you see here. And I'm not sure if this character beside him is actually a real person or a cardboard cutout. I'm not really sure. Do you recognize who this is? Anyone? Have you done masters? This is Michael Halliday, who's probably the most famous British linguist ever. And he's still active and he's a wonderful character. Anyway, Chris Lau is doing what he calls functional grammar, which is what Halliday has basically spent all his life doing. And his system, that I'll show you, is on how to ace multiple choice questions. And the piece here is for the old use of English, for the multiple choice close, which you'll recall from section C. You had, you have a passage and you've got A, B, C, D. Okay. So he's going to show us how to ace multiple choice close. Now you have to look at his system. He's got this great formula in terms of C's for conjunction, V's for verbs, and S for subjects. Okay, and then so he'll talk us through the formula. And you'll then see how he applies it to a couple of questions. It's absolute magic. Okay, you watch. Here we go. It's only Cantonese, but you'll get the idea.
佢哋都基本上會考嘅 MC close 嘅啲位置 ，OK？ 呢啲文法就實會考噶啦。睇到喎，首先你要知道兩樣嘢。第一樣咧就叫做 final verb。嗱 final verb 嚟講咧就叫 main verb 啦。咁我哋有兩個符號代替嘅。 嗱，呢啲咁嘅 main verb 或者 finite verb 咧，係唔包括 gerund，唔包括呢個 participle 同埋包括呢個 infinitive 啦。睇睇啦喎，仲有 conjunction。conjunction 嚟講咧，大家咧應該耳熟能詳啦，見過有 which 啦、what 啦、that 啦、since 啦、and 啦，係咪？好啦，咁發生咩事？原來我哋細個已經學過啦，有啲叫做 SVO 啦。咁 SVO 你會發覺喺一句 sentence 入邊咧係淨係得個 verb 嘅啫，嗰陣時冇 conjunction 嘅。睇到第二個例子啊，如果一句句子裏邊有兩個 clause 啦，呢兩句 clause 啦，咁你發覺係 SVO conjunction 再 SVO 嘅，計條數先。verb 等於2嗰陣時咧 ，conjunction 等於1，再例子喎。如果呢啲咁嘅 clause 1、2、3，如果呢咁嘅 clause 咧出現咗3句，你會發覺當 verb 係等於3個嗰陣時咧 ，conjunction 咧係有2個喎。你會發現啊 verb 嘅數目同 conjunction 嘅數目咧有關係嘅喎。總之係 n 減1，意思即係話 verb 永遠多過 conjunction 1嘅喎。OK， here we go。我哋去到2004年嘅第22條，我哋睇翻一個句子，熒光筆壓住呢一句。喺呢個句子入邊咧，有2個動詞，有1個 conjunction。咁即係咩意思咧？就正如正話所講 ，verb 等於2 ，conjunction 等於1。咁即係話而家已經去到一個 n 減1嘅地步，句式裏邊唔能夠加多個 conjunction，又或者加多一個 verb 嚟擾亂呢個 n 減1嘅關係。好啦，換句説話講，你望下 A。加咗 conjunction，B 加咗個 verb，呢2個已經瞬間睇到。
So that's how you eliminate 2 options. So now you've got 1 between 2. Of course, to be able to do this, you've got to have a high enough level of language to be able to process it from the first angle. Okay, let's just do one more.
2005年嘅第20條，我哋衡量呢一句熒光筆所壓住嘅句子，我哋發現到呢句句子裏邊係冇 conjunction 嘅。而個 verb 已經出現咗，咁即係咩意思啊 ？verb 等於1 ，conjunction 等於0，咁呢個關係 OK 咯喎，因為 verb 大過 conjunction 1啊嘛，咁即係話有任何嘅答案擾亂咗呢個關係，咁即係錯啦。你加多個 verb 落去係會錯㗎，所以 A 同埋 D 都錯，答案應該係 B、C 啦。
It's magic, isn't it? I mean, of course, if Chris Lowe's system works, you do better than you should. I mean, unfortunately, you have to have a high enough level of language to be able to process what verbs and conjunctions are, and it's actually very hard to cheat at English. You raise, if your level raises, you do better. If you don't, go anyway. But that's trying to beat the system, and it's not quite in the spirit of what is intended. Okay, in closing then, so as I said, Hong Kong English language exams have changed quite a bit over the decades. In the past, in the sort of distant past, little thought was, was given to the sort of real world connection, and as we've moved on in time, current exams have actually made a much stronger effort to relate what happens in the test to the real world, as far as that is possible, because you do have to, give a test to 70 or 80,000 DSE students, and you do have to rank them and decide which ones are the best for university, etc., etc. So it's not all of that plain sailing. But within those constraints, there is, I think, a very strong attempt made at trying to relate things to the real world. Hong Kong is an exam-driven system, yeah, sure. But I think it does pretty well in terms of the spirit of what its English language exams encourage, and if you have good teachers who can interpret what that spirit means, I think you can actually do some quite real worthwhile things. Okay? I've talked for an hour and 3/4, so that's it. That's it for now. Any observations or comments or queries on anything? Not really. I mean, I'm kind of no. I mean, I'm not a structuralist or whatever that means. No, basically, I'm looking at what do these tests mean in terms of just my main 3 points are validity, reliability, and washback. And what does it mean for us? Because I was an English teacher a long time myself. What does it mean for us on the ground? So it's a fairly low-level set of constructs that are hopefully linked to the real world. Please, can you have a mic? Try with the mic. Yeah.
Sorry, my question is about oral assessments. Do you think reading aloud passages would not help them with pronunciation and intonation testing? Because you mentioned that it's not associated with real life situations because we don't do that. But is it good to test their pronunciation and intonation?
Well, when I taught reading aloud a long time ago when I was part of the exam, sure, you do teach people how you fall, how you rise. And in terms of, I actually did a study. I did a very simple study in the late 80s where I got assessors to actually time how long it took someone to read the dialogue. Okay? And the quicker they read it, basically, the more fluent they were. So to an extent, yeah, I mean, reading aloud does, if you're trained what to do, it does help you a tiny bit towards improving intonation and pronunciation, but not those long kind of pieces. I think what is a great idea for reading aloud, you know, in the middle of the Post, of the Morning Post, there are these very short pieces on China, some of which are often really weird, you know, and it's, hey, listen to this, and you have about, 5 or 6 lines to read. You're not actually reading a long text, but you're trying to get a short text across. Those things are actually quite good for reading aloud, and because they make a point in a very punchy way. I think what you have to think is, what's the context for reading aloud? And it's often, hey, listen to this. You know.
As teachers, what's your opinion? Should we be driving our kids away from generic phrases like, I agree with you, and this is the end of my presentation?
When you hear it so much, your answer is yes. But you do structure conversations or presentations in certain ways, like the 4 boys. That was part of an hour lesson. And they first looked at at the kind of vocab behind the areas, but they then had a kind of a cheat sheet in terms of how you would structure, first, secondly, finally. So I think when I speak, when I structure stuff, I'll use kind of set phrases and things like that. So a bit of it is, I think, important. It's unfortunately when you hear everyone say, I'm agreeing with you, I'm agreeing with you, you need to, if you can, somehow recycle more than one expression. But I think some are important.
Hello, Professor. I have a question for you. It seems to me that the English language exams in Hong Kong are all conducted in English. And in this case, I find that some of the language of the instructions part is pretty complicated than those of the language it has to be texted itself. So in this case, I suppose for some primary school students, they don't have that level of language proficiency to understand the instruction. So in this case, what will the school and the text takers do to deal with it?
Yeah, I think that is a very valid point. And I was on some TSA committees myself where they were developing the P3 test. Okay, and there are some of the questions were like, what does it in line 5 refer to? I mean, if you can understand that, you're not P3. Find 2 words in the poem which rhyme. And I said, look, but rhyme is quite a complex word. And they said, that's okay. We teach about the form too, you know. So, but no, but I agree. I think in principle those words should be translated, or some of the rubrics should be translated. It's and I think okay, students practice tests and ultimately they don't read the rubric, you know. But if you can understand the rubric, you could probably score well on the test. I think it's a good point.
Yeah, is it the case that the student would probably do the text again and again, so they have already know what they're going to be tested?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. But I was talking to one of my teachers recently, who's in, and I was talking about reading, and I was saying he said he has a very low band 3 class, and I said if you teach, reading with band 3, maybe you should have some questions that they, read and answer in Chinese, as my own kids did with Form 6 with the AS level Spanish. I mean, it's a hard one to sell to your principal and to your panel chair, but I think it's a very valid point. You want them to interact with the text, and they can't if they don't understand the questions.
Yeah, I agree so. Well, I have another question. Just now I saw something on your PPT which is like the reading aloud question type has to be low in validity. And why is the case? Could you further explain this?
Because we don't read aloud in terms of a dialogue like that, unless you're an actor. As I said, you read aloud something that grabs you, but you don't read aloud a set piece in that kind of format.
Yeah. So in that case,
unless you're a teacher, I mean that's why, if you recall, I'm not sure if it's still there, but reading aloud did form part of the LPAT test. Because teachers do read aloud, and you're probably one of the few groups who do. So there are, depends on the situation, but that, examiner candidate just is not something that we do in that situation.
yeah. So does that mean if the text that has to be not that authentic, the validity would be low?
Yes, that's the idea.
All right. Yeah, I'm clear now. Thank you.
Any more? Okay.
Yes. We always have in context or real life situation in mind, and so should we say that from now on, when we set rubrics or testing students, we should never use grammatical terms which never appear in real life situation, right? And so we should do away with all the grammar terms.
Well, I mean, for example, what does it, in a P3 test, what does it in line 5 refer to? Can you say it, line 5, question mark? I mean, can you somehow get away from these words like refer and things? I actually asked my 11-year-old when if he could have a go at that question. He said, what does refer mean?
Yeah, I'm talking about school tests and exams, not the TSA. Because English teachers tend to test what have been taught. And so they always want, after teaching, just now you showed the reporter speech, then they will always have a part on reporter speech. And they always put the grammar terms there to make sure that they are doing what has been drilled. And so should we remind teachers to do away with all these grammatical terms to make it more authentic real life situation?
That's a very difficult question, because we are teachers, we need some grammar terms. Our students probably need some grammar terms as well, some of the basics. But if you think, and I tried this with my oldest kid when he was, after he finished his Spanish A-level, and I was asking in terms, I mean, Spanish grammar is very similar to English. Can you give me an example of a preposition? I said, come on, what's a preposition? And he said, the. You know, I mean, if you think what's a preposition in English and between what's a preposition in Cantonese, they're rather different. English ones come before and Chinese ones often come after. So what your concept is for certain meta-language terms are actually fairly difficult. Infinitive, I was talking to one of my panel chairs 30 years ago. Infinitives, oh, you know, we teach them that in Form 1. I said, but it doesn't make sense in the context of Chinese. So it's a very difficult line in terms of students understanding. And I've been in some, I was in a P6 class, a very good one, you know. And she could give, and the kids could actually differentiate what was an adjective and what was an adverb. You know, they could actually explain it to the teacher. My kids couldn't do that, you know, even as native speakers. You know. So the whole thing about grammar terms is a very difficult one. Even if you gloss them at times in the Chinese, they don't make sense. Some do. I know we do need basic forms like noun, verb, adjective, because you do have things to explain. You do have things to kind of underline and comment on. But we could talk for an hour on that. You know, it's a very difficult one, but it's a good question.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I'm a current English teacher in a primary school, and I was having a quite keen discussion with other teachers in my school. Because I'm very fed up with all these reading aloud, picture descriptions, and all these oral exams for the kids. And I was actually suggesting to have the discussion between themselves. But then other teachers would say, oh, they don't have the proficiency to listen or to understand others' speech, or you know, to carry out interaction between them. So would you suggest primary kids to actually have discussion for oral exams?
I don't know. I mean, because primary kids, for secondary kids, you are operating at a higher kind of intellectual level as well. I'm not sure how you would organize a discussion for primary kids, what kind of topics it would be around.
Yeah, because
I don't know. I mean, but I know all the stuff with pet, it's kind of very mechanistic in its own sense.
Because I was actually having it a few days ago, and it's all about, describe a journey for your friends from Australia to Hong Kong, 3 days, and they're simply like remembering all the stuff from the book and read them out.
Yeah.
It's actually like, other than pronunciation, what can I test them? Yeah, this is my struggle.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure really what you do with it. Most of my experience has been with secondary, so I can't. I'm a bit reluctant to guess. Then, oh yeah, do it with primary kids. I'm not sure how easy it would work, because primary kids don't have discussions, do they, in the way that the secondary kids do, I think. So it's interesting. I don't know. Sure, please.
In your conclusion, you said assessment in Hong Kong before this period of exam.
So do you think the quantitative data we derive from the examinations like TSA can determine the quality of teaching?
The quality of teaching. I mean, the TSA is an interesting exam, because I was on a number of TSA committees, okay? And the exam authority used to do their own thing. With the DSE, the exam authority, and the CBI get together. With TSA, it's even more of a joint effort, okay? And when I've been in moderation committees, the person there from the TSA is going through all the items, saying, have you got one on this construct and this and that, and all their kind of basic competencies that they've got linked down. So it's actually quite an interesting, it's quite content valid in that angle, because they are trying to look at what should have been taught. The problem is it's all multiple choice, and what does that feed back in terms of what you've been doing? And the speaking test is selective. So in terms of feeding back to good teaching, I kind of have my doubts. You know? It's not a bad exam, but, and again, being drilled for multiple choice, is a waste of time. All you do is you bore the kids. Some research has suggested that they get worse. You know, I mean, so all this time it's spent drilling along, these, what CDI used to call it, TSA tasks, which they're not. You know, they're not tasks. They're just, it's different test types. The government does. Okay. Well, there you go, 12 o'clock. Thanks for your attentive audience. I don't see that many people fall asleep. Thanks for coming. Next week, I'm not sure who's on next week, but the session rolls on, so if you can come, I'm sure they'd like to see you. Thanks for coming.